I've got a secret for you. This might come as a shock, so please sit down. Sean Payton does not like Russell Wilson. I know, that might be tough to hear. It's like hearing your parents secretly didn't like each other after they got divorced. Or maybe some of you know that. You've been paying attention. You're not surprised to hear that. And you think I'm an idiot for talking about it again. Okay? But just like my favorite movie, Brokeback Mountain, if I can borrow a quote, I can't quit you. And I can't quit talking about Sean and Russ.
Why don't you?
But there's a reason for it. Another nugget dropped. And I think it will give us clarity on who was right this season with Russ or Sean Payton as Russ moves forward in a Steelers uniform. And I promise you, I didn't want to talk about this. I didn't have a desire to talk about Sean and Russ. I wasn't fishing for a clicky thing to do a video on. I just read this new bullshit and was like, oh God, that's kind of interesting. And it all starts with one simple fact, right? Sean Payton did not choose Russell Wilson to run his offense, and Russ isn't suited to run that offense. Sean inherited him. Like when a grandparent dies and you get a bunch of hideous old furniture from the 70s, except if you try to get rid of it, it puts you $80 million in debt. So you have to at least pretend to try it out for a year before you replace it, which of course you eventually do as soon as you can. Now the big news when Denver benched Russell Wilson last season was that the Broncos allegedly approached Wilson to waive his injury clause, which if triggered by an injury would have made the Broncos on the hook for Wilson's contract into 2025. Now a lot of people were on Russ's side when that happened because he wouldn't waive that clause, which is his right.
Everything he did was absolutely Bush League, and we've allowed it to go because he won one funky ASS championship in New Orleans.
And this is a billion-dollar business. If you don't like a player, you move on. Like you ask guys to take pay cuts all the time.
Then you had a proxy war between both sides using the media as their mouthpieces in a battle of words. A battle of words is the only battle I'd ever stand a chance in, by the way. Now Russ himself eventually spoke about this issue saying,
they came up to me during the bye week and beginning of the bye week on Monday or Tuesday, and they told me that if I didn't change my contract, my injury guarantee, that I'd be I'd be benched for the rest of the year.
Which was following 2 wins, the second of which was Denver's first victory over the Chiefs since the Kennedy administration. Roughly speaking, I believe. Now, if you just looked at the raw numbers, it would have been fair to assume Russ was playing very well. He had 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions through 8 games. Not bad, but those stats didn't tell the whole story, did they? If you were a Broncos fan or anybody else sitting through those fucking games, you knew that Russ really wasn't performing at a high rate. Certainly not up to his contract. He was awesome in the red zone, but the offense was extremely choppy in between the 20s, inconsistent, and for 3 weeks the Broncos defense was doing most of the heavy lifting for that team. Yes, the same defense that gave up 70 to the Dolphins. It was a weird year, okay? So, that's all the stuff we knew. Denver took the largest cap hit in NFL history to dump a quarterback that had thrown 26 touchdowns to 8 picks, which was in fact the most TDs a Broncos quarterback had thrown in a single season over the last decade. Since Peyton Manning threw 39 TDs all the way back in 2014. Then we got to the NFL meetings back in March, and when Sean Payton was asked how the offense had to improve, he said this.
Well, I think this. Number one, we can't take as many sacks. If you looked at any of the data relative to what it does for your drives, and I think that was a big thing that hurt us a year ago. But obviously, you have to be efficient running the ball. Mike, there's a lot that goes into that.
That's basically saying Russell Wilson was the root cause of our problems without actually saying the name Russell Wilson. And to credit Russ, he dropped his sack numbers by 10 from 55 to 45 from 2022 to 2023. So that was an improvement. But if you look at Drew Brees' sack numbers, he took nearly 2 less per game. 27, 20, and 17 in his last 3 seasons where he started at least 15 games. So I get why that would be such a huge problem for Sean Payton with a veteran quarterback like Russ. And I agree with Payton. He wanted to run his offense like he always had. Short passes, quick hitters, get the ball out on time, and get ahead of the chains. Russell Wilson was designed in a lab to do the opposite. He made some spectacular plays in 2023, but for every highlight reel play that he extended or deep bomb he threw to Courtland Sutton, there were 3 or 4 or 5 plays that didn't go according to plan and set the offense back. Now, in the draft a couple weeks ago, Sean Payton really proved how serious he was about fixing that approach. He essentially drafted the opposite of Russell Wilson in the first round. Bo Nix is the most on-schedule, on-time quarterback we've seen in college football in the last 10 years at least. His whole brand at Oregon was keeping the offense in rhythm and playing point guard, and he did it better than anyone. Hell, he might throw a football before the ball is even snapped this season and get away with it. He calls his own protections at the line, processes information quickly pre and post snap, and to Sean Payton's delight was rarely sacked his last 2 years at Oregon. Just 5 sacks in 2023, despite dropping back and throwing the ball 470 times. Oh my God. The only real thing Bo and Russ have in common is that they're both men of God. But if there were any avowed atheists or non-believers in this draft class who were also efficient, rest assured Sean Payton would have at least taken a flyer on them. But even after the draft, we got new information about Payton's eternal displeasure with the 2023 season and how Russell Wilson played, looking beyond the basic numbers. It was Aditi Kinkhabwala who went on a Cleveland sports show and talked about where Russ failed in Payton's offense, saying,
he was constantly climbing out of the back of the pocket. He struggled with snap counts. He couldn't manage or handle the play calling. They went from putting a wristband on to by the end of the season, all the play calls had to be 2 words and everybody else was required to know what the play calls are.
Wow. Those are basic things he needs to do.
Why waste time? Say lot word when few word do trick.
Arthur Smith is a way bigger addition than Russell Wilson is.
Wow.
There is a very, 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 very valid reason that Sean Payton, who is one of the best quarterback coaches and one of the best offensive minds in our game, who has had success not just with Drew Brees, but with Jameis Winston, with Teddy Bridgewater, that Sean Payton is saying, I'm going to pay this guy millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to be nowhere near my locker room.
Holy shit, that sounds bad. But I wonder where she got that information. I wonder who was putting that out. I'm going to take a wild guess that it wasn't a player who was sharing that inside information with her. Unless it was Jerry Jeudy, who's a Brown now. Who do you think was actually more annoyed by Russell Wilson, Jerry Jeudy or Sean Payton? Considering there's no specific mention of Jerry and how Russ affected Jerry, I'm going to hint that it was Sean Payton giving this info. But I would say Jerry is the second source to confirm it. Okay, because you always got to have 2 sources.
There is a very, 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 very valid reason.
I think we could have used a couple more varies to hammer home the point there, but I think I got the gist of what she's trying to say. Sean Payton was tired of Russ, the same way a lot of the fans were frustrated with him, and they took their medicine, the biggest pill in the history of the NFL to abort a player, and it's not going to be fully digested until the end of the 2025 season, although they are projected to have close to $100 million in cap space next season, the Broncos. All right? As shitty of a thing as it is to say about Russ, I think Sean, or whoever gave out this info, is trying to tell us that they tried to make it easy for Russ, and that he struggled with things no veteran starting quarterback should be struggling with. A quarterback can take a while to adjust to a new offense and playbook. We know that. It took Brady a half a season in Tampa Bay, but I think this shows Russ doesn't have the confidence to take command and get a play called if he doesn't know it. The point is that they did everything they could to get Russ up to speed with the offense, and it just didn't work. If we're taking those quotes at face value, of course. They basically had to simplify what is admittedly a very complicated scheme, and it ended up hurting the overall product, even if it didn't look like that on paper. If this report is true, then Justin Fields will win the job in Pittsburgh, right? Denver had no other option. The Steelers do. If Justin Fields can run the full Arthur Smith playbook and Russell Wilson needs each play broken down into 2 words, he will be very appropriately paid as a backup for the Steelers. But if Russ starts and thrives, then Sean Payton will look like the problem, a man too stubborn and impatient to have given Russ a fair amount of time to really digest everything. Until then, we are speculating on a story that none of us should really give a shit about. But I am fascinated with the idea that Russ, after playing in the league for 11, 12 years, couldn't do very simple things a 12-year QB should be able to do. And the reason I think some of that is true is why the Seahawks were fine to move on from Russ. Right? But from a wider view, what's really getting old about the situation is that it's fucking old. The Broncos drafted a new quarterback, and God bless Bo Nix. Russell Wilson has been a Steeler for close to a couple months now, and we're still getting quotes and leaks about how much those two didn't get along. More than anything, I think I'm tired of hearing it come from the media rather than the horses' mouths themselves. Broncos pun, right? This would have all been cleared up if they were forced to sit down in front of the media with 2 microphones and just hash it out for as long as it would have taken to come to some sort of conclusion, which of course might have gone on longer than a Joe Rogan Protect Our Parks podcast, and I would have listened to every dang second. Here's another thing, both sides have their own media mouthpieces. Good ones, too. And no one has ever tried to recruit me to be used. That pisses me off. Well, that's not actually true, but it hasn't happened for a couple years. I'm ready to be a media stooge for the right price. I will put the PR spin on anything a coach or a player gives me, Broncos, regardless of whether or not it's even close to the truth, Broncos. For the right price, I will forego any ethics I may or may not even have in the first place, Broncos. Come the fuck on, I will be your best friend. And hey, Steelers, if you want to outbid them, come get me, baby. My last point, after kind of poo-pooing on Russ throughout this video, is that I think despite being on the receiving end of a lot of this feud, that Russell Wilson has come out looking pretty good. He hasn't put out any hits on Sean Payton since he was benched back in December of 2023, and he's done a good job showing restraint at outright addressing the media, or the more likely route he would have taken, sending out a very vague tweet that ends with the words blessed or God's got me. And even when he went on the I Am Athlete podcast with Brandon Marshall, he was still reserved there. Russ has followed one of the weirdest paths in the NFL, from being a superstar quarterback with Seattle, to being a villain in Denver, undeservedly so, to being more of a sympathetic figure as he heads into his first season as a Steelers QB. He's good at public relations for a very simple reason. He knows when not to say anything at all. And that's probably pretty easy to do when you're getting paid tens of millions to not even play for a team. Sean Payton is not good at that. He came in a guns a-blazing from day one as a Broncos coach and immediately threw Nathaniel Hackett under the bus for what he did in 2022 in Denver, and then he backed it up, ran him over a couple more times, burnt his corpse, and eventually lost to the Jets at home. Even though he was right about Hackett, we all knew he was. He didn't have to run his mouth like that, right? And I hope he's figuring that shit out. Like Russ, you come off a little bit better when you just keep most of your thoughts closer to the vest. We live in a feud culture, though. We live for this shit. Kendrick Lamar and Drake are putting out diss tracks about every 30 minutes, and it's more than we can get our grubby little hands around, so we're all complicit in this bullshit, me especially. As a Broncos fan, and I'm sure a lot of them agree with me, I'm ready to turn the page and move on from 2 very tumultuous years that were as hard on me personally as they were lucrative.
Russ rolling. Oh no, Russ! No!
The Jets pick it up to the 10-5 touchdown.
Fuck! Oh!
I'm excited to watch Bo Nix after dumping Russ. I think there's a lot of pressure now, though, on Sean Payton to prove his offense is as good as it's been touted with the quarterback not named Drew Brees. And I especially don't have anything against Russ. I'm not exactly going out of my way to root for him, though, in Pittsburgh, but I've never had anything against the guy other than the fact that he wasn't very good in Denver. And he stole about $100 million from us, and he beat the shit out of my team in Super Bowl 48. wait, shit, maybe I do hate him.
Very, 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 very valid reason.
Russ will get a fair trial in Pittsburgh, mostly because he's getting paid pennies as opposed to what Denver is giving him to not be here. But he's also in a true competition, regardless of anything Mike Tomlin says, because the minute he struggles, whether that's in training camp, preseason, or the regular season, they can turn to a quarterback with incredible physical tools and 3 seasons of starting experience in Justin Fields. If Russ starts and keeps his job, it won't be because the coaching staff or front office feels any monetary obligation to keep him in that role. And knowing the NFL schedule makers, they will probably send the Steelers to Denver in week 1. And all of this stuff is going to resurface again. Every word and every narrative is going to be rehashed, and at the end of the day, whoever wins that one game is going to be named the champion of this year-long feud, even though there's dozens of other coaches on either side and about 100 players that are going to have a say in the final result. And of course, 16 games after that one.
You have no idea how bad it gets.
Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here. I am on vacation, but we got videos coming out even while I am enjoying a pina colada on the beach.